Hello and welcome to this Digital Camera Magazine video tutorial. Today we're going to show you how to create a multiple exposure shot. Now we've taken these pictures using the camera on a tripod, so we've got everything nice and steady and we're taking exactly the same shot each time, and all we've done is to get Steve to run around within that scene and place himself in a variety of different positions. We can then take those into Photoshop, remove different elements, so we're left with a picture which has multiple Steves in the image. Okay, so if I just flick through each of these and we can see Steve moving around, he's playing hide and seek with himself. And what we're going to do is open those up into Photoshop CS3, use Auto Align to just very quickly align any sort of movement within the picture, and then what we can do is just erase parts of the layers, and we should end up with our multiple exposure shot. So if we go into Photoshop, and the first thing we want to do is just use a script to open up all of those pictures into one document. So if we click on File, we need to go down to Show All menu items, and you should see just underneath Automate the Scripts option. And what we want to do is select Load Files into Stack. When that appears, you'll be able to browse for your pictures. We've got a folder here called Steve, and all I want to do is select all of those because those are all the images in our sequence. Click Open, and that'll load those into the Load Layer dialog window. And what we also want to do is just select Attempt to automatically align source images. Once we've done that, we just click OK, and it takes a little time for it to load all of those pictures in. And we should be left with multiple exposures of Steve in a variety of different layers in one document. Okay, now all of those images have loaded into the new document, and now what Photoshop's doing is just auto-aligning all of those layers so that each picture matches up, and it'll make the whole process of removing areas of each of the layers a lot easier. We can also, just before we go into the erasing of parts of some of these layers, we'll just check through the selection just to see if there's any of the images that we want to get rid of. And if we do that at the beginning, it just makes things a lot easier as we go through the process. Okay, that's finally finished, and if we just click through each of the layers, firstly we can just check that they've all lined up nicely, and secondly what we can do is just to remove any of those layers that we think are going to conflict. So here we can see that this layer and this layer are basically overlapping, so we've got two pictures of Steve in the same place, so we can just remove one of those. So I'll just throw that straight into the bin. Also, these two as well don't really fit into the picture, so we'll just get rid of those. Okay, and we've now got our selection of layers that we want, so if we just switch those all back on, and what we want to do is select our top layer, which is the one with Steve hiding his eyes, and we're going to take the opacity of this layer down to about 30-40%. That way we can just see what's going on in the background and the other layers just coming through. Okay, we can see Steve here on the right hand side, and all we're going to do is just select our brush tool, make sure that we've got quite a large brush size. Okay, we want to take the hardness down to about 50 just to give it a slightly soft edge, and make sure we're brush mode, our opacity is at 100%, our flow is at 100%, and then if we just click onto the document and zoom in, going Apple plus or Control plus, and now what we can do is just go over those areas where Steve appears in the layer below, and just by using the erase tool we can bring through that detail of Steve in the background. Once we've done that, all we do is we pop over to the layers palette, we switch off that second layer, and we've now got the third layer, making sure we've got our top layer selected. We always keep that one selected at the moment, and then we can go back and then we can just work over that top image, removing any of the image information and allowing Steve to appear on through from the layer below. Okay, we'll just quickly go through the rest of these layers doing exactly the same thing, and you can see how quick and how easy this is. Okay, and that's the final layer and the final version of Steve. We've got all of the other layers turned to invisible, and what we do now is if we just quickly zoom up and we can turn all of those layers on. Obviously this second layer is hiding all of the layers underneath. So what we want to do is just remove any of the information around Steve that isn't needed, so we can start to get those other layers just shining through. So if we go out to the marquee tool, I've selected an elliptical marquee, and all I'm going to do is very quickly just draw an elliptical marquee around Steve, then go Control Shift or Apple Shift I just to invert our selection and hit delete, and that'll basically remove all of the information from that layer bar Steve. So he's left remaining on that layer shining through, and the layers below that layer will start to shine through. And now what we do is just repeat that for the following layers. So make sure you select the next layer down. We're going to just draw the elliptical marquee around Steve again, go Control Shift I and delete, and again we've just removed all of that information from around Steve. Again, click the next layer down, click once to deselect, just draw your oval around the subject, invert the selection and delete, and then you just repeat that for each of the layers until you get down to the final layer. Okay, we've got to the last image in the stack, and basically we leave that exactly as it is. Now go back up to the very top layer with the opacity at 40%, and all we want to do is just to increase that back up to 100%. And there we have all of our Steves in the same image. So Control D just to deselect, and then what we want to do is just to flatten those different layers in the stack down into one document. So making sure you've got your top layer selected, hold down Shift, click your bottom layer, and then go up to your layer options and just select flatten image. Finally, we just want to adjust the exposure within the whole of the picture, so we're going to use a curves layer for this. So click on your adjustment layers, go up to curves. That'll bring up the familiar curves dialog window. What I want to do here is just to lighten some of the shadow areas and then just darken a few of those highlights and increase some of the midtones. So first of all, we'll start by just increasing the midtones. So if we click in the middle and just make a singular point, and we just see how that's lightened up all of those midtones. We go up to our highlights and we'll just reduce that back down slightly. And then we'll go to our shadows and we're just going to increase those again just a little bit. We just click our preview button on and off, and we can see how that's just lightens up the picture, and we get a little bit more of the detail of Steve through in the image. So we just click OK, flatten that down by going Control E or Apple E, and there we have our final montage multiple exposure photograph of Steve.